Thank you very much for coming, everybody, to the AAUW Forum for 3rd District Supervisor. We have 3 fantastic candidates up here, including Joan Hartman, Karen Jones, and Jessica Alvarez Parker. My name is Janet Blevins, and I am going to be the moderator. The first item I'm going to do is have the candidates draw a number to determine their answering order for the first question. After that, I will rotate. So, draw a number to determine who goes first.
Oh my
No, that's we could go on like that for hours, couldn't we?
I mean, I'm happy to go, or I mean, what can I
Alright,
do?
come on now.
I'll play by your rules.
Oh, lucky me. And now, I'm going to say a little bit about AAUW. AAUW is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization that has been in existence for almost 140 years now. And in the Lompoc, Vandenberg Village area, we have been holding forums such as these with candidates, such as this one tonight, for over 50 years. So, AAUW, I'm going to use the word fights for equality for women through advocacy, education, research, and one other one that I have to look at my notes for. Policy. So, in that regard, locally, AAUW partners with SpaceX and sent as many 8th graders as we can afford with SpaceX's help to a STEM camp at UCSD every summer for 1 week. It's a residential camp. STEM, of course, stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. So these young middle school girls have an opportunity of a lifetime at UCSB for that week in the summertime. And we're very proud to be able to continue to do that. I think we should just go ahead and get started after that. So, the order number, I guess, from Karen's reaction, I guess she got to go first.
No.
How wrong can I be? So all of the candidates were given these first 4 questions ahead of time. There will be one question, question number 5, after the 4 published questions have been answered, and it's a secret. So you'll know it soon. After that, we'll have a 10-minute intermission and an opportunity for audience members to write down questions on our little 3x5 cards that we have back there. And candidates will answer some of those questions. A committee of AAUW will go through them and figure out which questions we have time for. Anything else? You'll get 2 minutes to answer each question, and then you'll get a 1-minute rebuttal. And if I, as the moderator, need to even things out, or if any situation arises where somebody needs another minute, we'll discuss that. We'll see. As long as we make it fair. We're disappointed not to have the 4th candidate, Bruce Porter, here tonight. He originally had said that he had cleared his calendar and would be able to make it, but that changed. So unfortunately, we don't get to hear from him tonight. But we have 3 other fantastic candidates that we'll be hearing from. So on that note, we will begin. The timekeepers are right here in the front row. You'll get a 30-second warning.
Yeah.
And then a stop. Okay. And question number 1. Excuse me. Hello. Opening statement for 2 minutes. And who got the number 1?
I did, Jessica.
Jessica. Okay. All right.
So I think the best place for me to begin is from a place of gratitude. I want to thank the American Association of University Women, Vanderbilt branch for creating this space, and a special thanks to Pam for just helping me to connect to the forum. I want to also just say that I'm here because I really do love Santa Barbara County. It's affectionately known by a historian of Santa Barbara County, Walker A. Tompkins, as California's wonderful quarter. I was really happy to discover that name for it. This place is really special to me. I was actually married on Palama Beach in 2014 on International Women's Day. So this place definitely holds a very special place in my heart. I graduated from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in environmental studies, and I've just been very blessed to raise my son in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, in my opinion. I am sorry, I'm getting a little nervous. I am a renter. I am a climate-concerned mother. I am a community activist. And I really believe that investing in the protection of our land, air, water, and empowering and investing in our communities directly is the best bet for us moving forward as a county. I'm a proud Isla Vista resident, and I'm proud to serve as the president of the Isla Vista Community Development Corporation. And I work, and I'm blessed to work with so many talented, energetic, and just really inspiring people. And I feel like our diversity, I have so many wonderful people that are in this circle, young, old, housed, homeless, houseless, many diverse people. Our superpower is our diversity and our desire to build a world where we all belong. So again, thank you all. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Hold applause until the end of opening statements.
I just assumed can't compete.
Okay. Next opening statement.
So I wait for your no. Well, good evening and thank you. Many of you know me well, and some of you I'm just meeting for the first time tonight. So briefly, my background. My mother was a nurse who worked at the City of Hope, and she cared for my father, a disabled Korean War veteran. He died, leaving her a 36-year-old widow with 9 and 11-year-old daughters to raise. So I have some key lessons from my childhood. Any family can be struck by tragedy, and the importance of veterans' benefits. And from my mother, resolve, resilience, and work that speaks to your heart. My calling has been public service and working to protect our air, water, and communities. Can you hear me? Can you check my time while we get this?
Yeah, this is off, yes. Does anybody have trouble hearing right now?
I think the acoustics are pretty good.
Well, I think some people do, so turn it on,
All
sorry.
right, sorry, I thought you handed it.
Yeah, I know.
There, is that better? Okay, so after I've worked as an attorney and a teacher, and after retiring to the sunny Nez Valley, I served 7 years as a CASA advocate, working with neglected and abused foster children, 3 years on the County Planning Commission, and now 3 years as your supervisor. When I began, the county faced some really major challenges. Disaster on a scale and frequency we've never seen before, serious budget and pension shortfalls, long-term drought, and an overflowing jail. Today, the county has made some great strides towards increased fiscal responsibility, public safety, and economic vitality. Our budget is healthier than it's been since 2008, and that's despite the disasters, and we've fully restored our rainy day fund. We have a new jail that'll be opening. We have a new resources center at Tahiguas. Our fire department is gearing up for borderless dispatch that'll make us all safer. We're creating a greener, more resilient energy economy, and our local economy is strong. And we've demonstrated on our Board of Supervisors that we can bridge diverse perspectives and work together cooperatively, and we're ready to work on the challenges that lay ahead.
Thank you very much. Next, please, opening statement.
Hi, my name is Karen Jones, and I don't need the microphone. I was born on an oil lease, 11C in Kern County. I am married to a native of the area who was born on a flower ranch this side of Buellton. So I have a little different path. I got involved in the race in 2016, and that led to changes in my career path. I worked, then I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was a volunteer. I've become more politically involved in the last, I would say, 6 years, but for the past 4 years after running against Joan and Bruce and another candidate 4 years ago, I ran for the Community Service District in Santa Ynez. I won and was the first woman. That might appeal to you. It didn't occur to me till I started thinking of this association of women, but I ran because I cared about my community, and I cared about myself, my husband, my family, and there were things happening in our valley, and your valley is a different valley, but kind of part of that, yes. So I wanted to get involved to protect my home and to protect my family. My 5-year-old grandson, Emmett, he's one of my grandchildren. He really enjoys talking about these things with me. So I'm really happy that he is here with my son, Alex. And that's why I'm running. And it's very rewarding to get involved in my community at this level after doing it as a mother and a grandmother. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. All right. Question number 1. Most people maybe picked it up at the table in the front, but I will repeat it. Question number 1, and we will go ahead and give the person who drew number 1 gets to go first on question number 1, because well, no, I guess we should rotate right away.
Yeah.
Everything was pre-planned, so describe your plan for addressing homelessness in Santa Barbara County.
So it was pre-planned, so number...
So I go number 2,
yes, there
and
you
I'm
go.
still wondering about this microphone. Okay,
Free to
I'm going to
choose.
talk loudly because I find that a little distracting. So I'm okay, good. Addressing homelessness is one of our state's most pressing and vexing issues. 1/4 of the homeless population in our nation lives here in California. And shelter is just fundamental to every person's health, safety, and sense of well-being. And having people unsheltered creates serious risks. I had an opportunity to attend a conference and hear about a survey, downtown street team, asking homeless people, what's the hardest thing about being homeless? Is it not knowing where your next meal is coming from, being cold, not having shelter? And they said, no, none of those. It's being invisible. So seeing people homeless tears at the fabric of our society. And when we encounter people living in their cars or on the street, some of us avert our eyes because we know something is deeply, deeply wrong. I toured the Santa Ynez riverbed, and in addition to an acute case of poison oak that sent me to urgent care, I came away with a renewed sense of urgency about this issue. It's really a vexing problem because so many different things converge: issues of poverty, abuse, addiction, and mental illness. I witnessed firsthand that there's really no single quick fix. Each person came to it through a different path, and each person requires a different path out. The county, since I joined the board, has developed a revolutionary new tool, the Coordinated Entry System. That's a database that allows all the different agencies, doctors and shelters, to work together. I've been appointed to a regional task force that is allocating millions of dollars to homeless, and this year we've opened hundreds of new units. I'll continue working with the Housing Authority because we have to build many more units. But homelessness is now at the very top of Californians' agenda. I heard that on the radio coming here today. So there's both federal and state money that are coming, and I'm determined that Santa Barbara County is positioned to get that money here.
Next.
This is interesting. I enjoyed hearing Joan's take on it because I think she gets some of it right, that it is a very diverse population. But to say that the biggest problem is that they're invisible is incorrect. That is not the biggest problem homeless people have. There is everything from drug addiction, mental health issues, chronic schizophrenia, and then there is the transient homeless person that it's a transient problem. Many homeless people are transients, although they seem to like the weather here and come to the nice areas, and they also, homeless people often go where there are a lot of services. I can speak to this issue because I was homeless, and I lived in the Salvation Army for 8 months when I was 15. And so I was a certain type of homeless. I was a person with an infant child, no home, nowhere to go, no skills. So I lived at the Salvation Army, and they had a set of, I don't know if we would call it requirements, but you can live here, but attend school, work in the daycare center, etc. So I think the most important thing is getting real about the homelessness problem and not use it as a way to build another big database government program. California is #1 in homelessness, and it has been since we have not been #1 in other things, as we're also #1 in welfare. And so it's become a financial boon to people that want to grow the state. But I know it from a personal situation, and I would get real, I would identify the problems, and I would get down to treatment. I've been through from the state hospital system and working with people, and I know what the answers are. And it's going to be tough, we're going to have to be dedicated, but we're going to have to be real. Thank you.
Next. Thank you very much.
I want to go back to Joan's mention of urgency here, and I think housing first is absolutely a core part of the planning that's gone around addressing homelessness at the county level. I've done my homework. I've been paying attention to the phase 1 and phase 2 plans to address homelessness, and that's definitely the top of the list in terms of the recommendations. Other things that I would add to the equation. I was raised to recognize that homeless people are people. My mother experienced homelessness at an early age and was living in her car with her family. Her mother had gotten really ill and was unable to work. So it's really important to recognize that homelessness has many different faces. For many families, it's very close. Housing insecurity is a real issue. So that's why housing first and affordable housing are a really important part of addressing this issue. In fact, they're the most important parts, in my opinion. Also making sure that we're recognizing the dignity and respecting people on the streets. I take the time with my son to make sure that we actually make eye contact and we do talk to the folks on the streets. I know a lot of their names. I've seen them here for years, and what really disturbs me the most is the age of a lot of the folks that I see laying in the street. It's really disturbing to see seniors really suffering and seeing folks making their way to brunch in downtown Santa Barbara. And I also was reading that in Lompoc, we're seeing more families finding their way onto the street. So affordable housing is absolutely where I would start. Making sure dignity and respect is how we address these people and bring them back into our community.
Thank you. Now we will do a 1-minute rebuttal. So anybody who wants to respond to one of the other candidates for a minute will get that time.
I would like to respond. I respectfully disagree that housing is the #1 problem, because I think treatment in many cases is a priority for these people. And I think housing sounds like we're just building a place to live without the support. And getting back to what I said earlier about the state hospital system, there were lessons learned. Reagan, as governor, closed those. And I'm not saying that we need to turn Channel Islands College back into Camarillo State Hospital, but we need to have an open, honest discussion and identify the individual problems within. And I agree that people need to be treated with dignity, but when you have chronic schizophrenia, sometimes you need more than making eye contact and a place to live. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to say I've participated in the point-in-time count. It's a snapshot, but it does give us trends. What we know is we have about 1,800 in the point-in-time count. It may be an undercount, but 1,000 in Santa Barbara, about 500 in Santa Maria, and about 300 in Lompoc. That number has held steady. That means this is something we can deal with. There's two aspects to homelessness. One is supportive services, and sometimes people who are in their homes need these supportive services to stay. And then those who are houseless now, it's federal policy to do housing first. So if you've got problems, get people into a house, then they can get the supportive services to get them on their feet and more stable.
Jessica?
I just want to add to that too. The county's plan includes that continuum of care, so that wraparound to make sure that folks are getting the services that they really need. For those that are better able to make their way back into the economy and the workforce, there's that. But there are folks that are going to require consistent long-term care. So we need to figure out where we're going to get the revenues to make sure that we're prioritizing their care and their needs as well. Making sure that we're getting seniors off the streets and families, making sure that they have access to the housing that they need. So I go back to housing.
Thank you. Question number 2. And I'm relying on the candidates to determine who gets to go first for question.
I think that might be me, but I'm not sure. Or is it you?
Yeah.
Oh, if it's you, I think it's me, but yeah. Yeah, I'm not all that great at the planning, like, no, we're going to be fair and slice it up. I don't mind going first. I don't mind going, yeah.
What will be 3 of your county budget priorities?
As an elected official, I consider myself a trustee of the taxpayers' money, and my inclination along with the rest of the board is to manage your money conservatively and prudently. So I've worked for a number of government agencies, so I know that processes can outlive their utility. So periodically, it's really important that government look at its operations and see what it can do more effectively and more efficiently. Our county is engaged in a 5-year effort called Renew 2022, which involves scrutinizing each of the 21 departments to see how we can do our work better and how we can be more effective and deliver exceptional services to our residents. We're investing in information technology, building upgrades, and campus-wide planning. We're revamping many of our programs. And I want to talk about just one to give you an example, co-response. When there's a 911 call involving mental illness, we now send a psychologist and a trained deputy to deal with that crisis.
Can you speak up, please?
And they de-escalate. And what that means is that instead of increasing numbers of offenses and getting in jail, these people are walked down and get the kind of treatment they need, and it saves families grief and it saves the county money. The county needs, though, to look not only internally but externally. How do we support economic vitality? How do we keep and attract desirable businesses that have good jobs and keep a robust income stream? So we've supported studies to look at economic development, and we're working on that. Just yesterday, I visited the Entrepreneur and Innovation Program at UCSB, bringing people from North County to see how we can translate some of that here to North County businesses. A final priority for me are parks, trails, and recreation. We have, for the first time, all 8 cities and the county working on a master plan for recreation.
Okay, thank you. My most recent experience with a budget is the Community Service District, and I'm happy to say that we, as of last night, 4.4 million, we're free and clear. We own our building free and clear. But of course, we're running a small community service district, not a county. With that said, it gets back to getting real, identifying the problems, and in the budget, there's something that needs to be said that's uncomfortable, and that is the public employee pensions. We do have a very robust economy in Santa Barbara County, and that's encouraging, but at the same time, we have these unfunded pension liabilities, and as we talk about in growing these programs and increasing these services, that means more employees, more public employees who will be in public employee unions. And that is not only unfair to the individual private sector person, but you also look at people who retired before there was this big push for public employee unions. And Woodrow Wilson even said, this is a dangerous thing. If you want to know what's going to happen, look back 100 years, because we've probably done a full loop. And that is a budget thing that concerns me greatly, and I think that that is something that needs to be addressed. That said, I like the idea of going through, identifying, and we have to get tangible returns on our investments in the county. And when I say investments, we do not invest in services in the way the private sector does. It's about being responsible and doing what we should do, but not treating private citizens as though they're all golden pork chops. Like, oh, revenue, let's get some more revenue, let's grow and let's build our political base. Let's treat individuals and let's respect the private sector that makes this an exceptional nation. Thank you.
I want to recognize that the efforts that the county has made to practice fiscal responsibility. We have our rainy day fund in place, like Joan mentioned, which is great. And I also want to make sure to presence climate change here. We had a huge disruption to our economy from the Thomas fires. We can only expect more disruptions in the future. So what are we doing to safeguard our economy and make sure it's really able to respond to climate? And I think going back to that point about economic vitality and what that actually looks like is really important. So making sure that we're working effectively and leveraging assets at the county level, especially UC Santa Barbara, where we have our future workforce. We have young people that want to be able to afford to live in the county. So I want to make sure that that's a part of the budget. One thing that was brought to the executive office of the county was a recommendation on something called horizon scanning. So being able to look into the future, not to predict it, but to be able to be in the right mindset to ask the right questions about what we need to expect, what we need to have in place. So I think making sure that we're building the economy of the future needs to be absolutely a priority. And that means increasing revenues from smart economic ventures. So renewable energies, businesses that are going to grow jobs and make sure that those jobs and that wealth is staying here and building our commonwealth.
Thank you. 1 minute rebuttals. Same order or?
Building our commonwealth, I love that expression. I just wanted to talk about pensions for a minute. In 2000, we had more, our pensions were overfunded. And so when I came to office, and this is not just the county actually is more prudent than the state pension system. But what has happened is that in the county, we have employees picking up more of their pension costs. So we're paying less out of our general fund, and we've negotiated that last year. I also want to mention that we've got PEPRA now, so we've got newer employees under different systems, and by 2030 we're going to be balanced.
Thank you. Next, anybody else?
I would just like to make the point that there is nobody, when you have two professional candidates in a race, who is representing the individual, because you have certain unions lining up behind one of the professional candidates and then other unions lining up behind the other. It's kind of like battling unions sometimes. And I am a private citizen, and I would represent you as private citizens, and that would bring diversity to the discussion and not just make it my union versus your union for a political base.
Jessica, did you have a rebuttal for any part of anybody's
No, I
question?
don't think I have one.
All right, thank you very much. Question number 3. How do you plan to address climate change, fossil fuel development, and its impacts on our county?
So, in my opinion, and there are many others that would join me in this, believe that climate change is absolutely the existential threat of our day. And I know this sounds to many that it could be an alarmist threat, but I don't think that's the case. I think we need to move away from fossil fuel development. That means saying no to 750 new oil wells in Cat Canyon. I think that needs to be made clear. And I think we need to be moving forward towards a just transition. So that means recognizing that folks working in the oil industry are going to need to have other options. They're going to need to make sure that they're going to be able to provide for themselves. Make sure that our communities are put into a place where they can actually succeed. So investing in clean, renewable energy infrastructure is absolutely necessary. Again, making sure that we're recognizing this immense desire coming from our young people here to be able to live in the county and have climate resilient, affordable housing, sustainable housing, and making sure that they have access to the jobs of the future. I feel like Santa Barbara County is so beautifully positioned to lead the way on this. For goodness sakes, we're the birthplace of the environmental movement. I think it's time that we really earn that title. And I think that we have all that we need. I work in community and I get to work with such brilliant people that have wonderful ideas. And I am always frustrated. How do we make sure those ideas make their way to the right rooms so they're heard by the right people? So I think we have everything we need to fight climate change and to, in fact, lead the way in Santa Barbara County. I actually am willing to be quite optimistic that we can face the challenge before us.
Who goes next?
Oh, okay, happy to do it. Greenhouse gases are like a thickening blanket around our globe. And the last 10 years have been the warmest ever post-industrial revolution. And weekly we get new reports of trouble, most recently the unprecedented fires in Australia. Santa Barbara County is heating up faster than the rest of the globe. 1.5 is about where we are Celsius elsewhere. We're already at 2 degrees Celsius, that's 4.6 degrees Fahrenheit here in Santa Barbara County. We're hotter, our oceans are rising faster, and they're more acidic. So we are experiencing it already more acutely than elsewhere. We've witnessed already longer fire seasons and bigger and more frequent fires, extended droughts with shorter and more intense rainy season, bluff collapses, debris flows, weird weather including tornadoes, rain bombs, and extreme winds. So we have to reduce GHGs and we have to transition as fast as possible as we can to a low carbon green economy. And we have to adapt our infrastructure, roads, bridges, structures, and facilities for these changed conditions. And we have to organize ourselves, our families and our communities, our workplaces to be more resilient in the face of these threats. This is a top priority. It's public safety, plain and simple. I've championed in our county. This is something I've been a leader at, was elected on. Solarizing our county buildings, electrifying our fleet, community choice energy. It's a program that'll deliver electricity next year, complete green electricity to ratepayers throughout our county and reduce rates and also reinvest here in projects in our county. So under my sponsorship, we've also invested $1 million in looking at how we can develop more commercial solar and wind here in our county, creating good jobs and making this a just green economy transition. So we're facing great challenges, but we can do it here. We've got the wind project coming through now.
Karen?
I like this question a lot because, as I said in my introduction, I was born on an oil lease. I have been around fossil fuel production my whole life, and I'm interested in the history of it. Also, as a native Californian, I hear some of these, the sky is falling stuff, and it makes me think, we're talking about 100 years, there are 10,000 years maybe of what we think we know about history. And it sounds a lot like in my lifetime, there was a feeling that there was going to be the end of the world for a different reason. It seems like every generation is on the brink of destruction. I feel optimistic about this. I like fossil fuels, and I do want to move toward just keep being more efficient. That just makes sense, but this doesn't have to be some kind of rock held at our head as something scary and the urgency. The market is what came up with energy. That's really what I wanted to talk about. And the government needs to invest and we need to, push this or that. That's the beautiful thing about a free market. I'm not talking about some corporate, government, private. I'm talking about a guy gets an idea and it's a good idea and the market really susses these ideas out. So we can get a bunch of experts to draw lines around Santa Barbara and say this is going to happen or that. But I can't predict the future. I know climate change is real. I believe, I can't prove it maybe because science is always evolving, but the dinosaurs really did become extinct. And things are going to happen, but we will figure it out. Every generation will, through innovation, will come up with ideas, and that's exciting to me. But I like the energy sector. I think it's a great, great place for our county to be.
Okay. So that was 3 responses, and now we have 1-minute rebuttals.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah. Karen, I wanted to go back to what you were saying about the free market here and just recognize that clean renewable energy is becoming increasingly cheap. And in fact, it is the better economic decision moving forward. So the tough choices that we make now, the planning that we do now, and the prioritization that we do now is really going to be what moves us to a better position into the future. And I think we need to really listen to the young people whose futures that we're making decisions about here. They really want us to be brave. They want us to be innovative. And in fact, there are so many new technologies coming online that we could deploy in our county to make sure that this happens here first. And I really, again, want to stress the positionality of Santa Barbara County. We got everything we need to make this happen. And the market, in fact, it's supporting this.
I'll go. Well, 11,000 scientists publishing this year in peer-reviewed journals, unanimous. Climate change is happening, it's urgent, and we need to address it. There's no question about it. And what we know with the corporations, the fossil fuel corporations, their projections for growth are business as usual. They are not, we just had a UN emissions gap report saying that what was projected in 2010, they're on that same line to 2030. They are not creating a bridge to the low carbon green economy. So we cannot allow private sector to, as it currently is structured, to determine our energy future. We need to take control. We need to have community choice energy. Even for these power shutoffs, we need to have more locally distributed energy through microgrids. That's how we're going to do it, not big corporations and business as usual. We need to make some profound changes that are going to make our world a lot more just.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I hear what both of these ladies are saying, and it is consistent with what is rewarded with government money, that this is, the talking point that we're all going to be on. But I look in this room, everything is here energy-wise because of fossil fuels and the evolution of energy production. And I promise you that Era Energy and Cat Canyon is a wonderful thing. My father-in-law worked in Cat Canyon under Tidewater Oil. I love oil production there. And when the market, when it makes sense, they will do these other things, and they are. But we can talk about all of this, but I wonder if these two ladies would ban, it's so urgent, let's just stop driving cars now. Is that your commitment that you're willing to make tonight?
Can we answer?
Yes.
Are we getting each one more one minute rebuttal?
Yes, we'll do one more minute apiece if you want it.
Of course.
Karen, we're going to go 1 more minute and 1 more time. Is that right? How do we vote? on a rebuttal to climate.
Yes, on climate, yeah.
Should I go first? Well, I'll go first. No question, transportation is where we're having the most difficult time. So that's where we need to focus. I was just at a meeting today where we're getting a lot more money to get the electric infrastructure in place for charging. We're also going to have subsidies for people who are low income to get electric cars. We can drive electric cars, and let me tell you, I own one, and it's a lot better. You service it once a year. You're not dripping oil in your parking lot. Electric cars are the way of the future. We can do a lot more with transit. We can do a lot more. We just learned about a new program in Santa Barbara County where they're going to have curb-to-curb public transit in small vehicles, and we have micro-mobility. It's a new world in transportation, and it's a very exciting one.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm happy to agree with Joan. There's so many amazing possibilities right here before us when it comes to transportation. And to answer your question, like directly, Karen, no, I'm not going to stop riding in a car. I have a child. If I need to take him to the doctor's office, I need to be able to use a car. The point is to make sure that we're prioritizing space to build that infrastructure. This is not a question of personal choice. This is a question of systems change. So I want to make sure that when we're having a conversation about climate change, one of the most complex challenges we've ever faced as a species, that we're not getting caught up in this black or white conversation. It's much more nuanced than that.
I like talking about this, and I'll go 1-minute rounds all night because I'm really just warming up. I like, the electric vehicle, cool, and it sends a message, and that's really neat for people getting tax dollars from me to show, look, I've got this Tesla or whatever you're driving, nice, expensive electric vehicle, and it's great, but it's got its own set of problems. You've got this giant battery. There was a very unfortunate, tragic accident on the pass not that long ago. There were 3 cars involved, and it was horrible, and I'm just saying that the only one where nobody survived was the electric car, because these are big batteries. They're very dangerous. They're lithium batteries, and so it is a complex problem, but sometimes you trade one problem for another problem just so you can signal virtue. I want to have a real discussion because, yes, but markets, not give me more of your money and I'll fix it. Can't even get the order of the questions right, folks. Thanks.
Okay.
One more round?
Oh, Jessica, did you?
I'm happy to say something.
Okay, then we each get 1 more minute,
Wait
right?
just a minute.
No, I don't think we need to.
Did
Yes, you
everybody get another
yes,
minute?
we all.
I did.
Yes,
yeah.
it was all a fair slice here, but I'd say we'll go 3 more slices. I like talking about it, but we can move on.
It's okay, we can move on.
Yeah. Yes.
Question number 4.
This is good.
How will you support diversity at all levels of county government?
I think I'm doing it right now in this debate. Diversity of ideas. And that's where the real diversity is. This week, I don't do a lot of social media, but on Twitter, that's the only one I use, and it's where I get my news. And so much of the discussion is rightly about Dr. Martin Luther King. And when I was a young child, probably about my grandson's age, I remember the March on the Mall and just really grasping the idea, listening to those words, we're going to judge people on the content of their character. And as a little kid living in kind of a, faraway place, thinking that is such a beautiful idea. And I never would have guessed that now at the other end of my life, we're going backward and we're divvying up people in groups by color, by sexual orientation. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We are individuals here. Diversity is in the opinion, in the discussion. We are little snowflakes, but not in the way it's used today. My mother used to say, we're individuals. We're all as different as the snowflakes, and let's embrace what is good. Let's go with that. And to judge people based on their ethnicity or that just really offends me, frankly. It offends me. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whose turn?
It's
Jessica.
Yeah, so as the only person of color here at the table, I want to say I'm right here, but I completely agree with Karen. I think a diversity of ideas is an important thing to discuss. So not only should we have greater representation in the county when it comes to race, gender, ethnicity, but we also need to have a diversity of learners and thinkers in those spaces to make sure that we are working together effectively as a community. That's the thing. How do we learn how to work together despite our differences? Going back to basics, going back to kindergarten. So honoring diversity is something that I would absolutely prioritize. And I want to just make a point. This candidacy, I hope is a reminder that we need to be supporting more young people to run for office, especially at the local level, and especially when these young people want to be committed to their communities and want to see change. We are here for the long haul, so we're looking for more support for that.
When I was a graduate student, I was the only woman in my class, and there were no women professors in my entire university. So I got an experience firsthand of what it is to be a fish out of water, what it is to feel like an outsider. And in the academic world, we've seen a transformation because we've learned that diversity brings new questions, new perspectives, and new answers. And so that's why academic institutions in particular, and STEM sciences especially, because they need to be competitive for our economy and national security, are actively pursuing diversity and eagerly recruiting previously underrepresented groups. Diversity enriches the entire enterprise. In the context of county government, there are two aspects. How are we more accessible to the people who need to reach into county services, and how are we more diverse internally? So in terms of how we're more accessible, I mean, it's like ADA accessibility. We want to make our county government buildings more open. We want to make our county processes more open. So what we've done is we've translated our website, so there's Spanish, 46% of our population is Spanish. So our meetings next year, I'm going to propose in the budget. Many people speak some English. I speak a little Spanish, but I would have a hard time following the complexity of our meetings. So to be able to translate in our meetings into Spanish, our 211 is also in Spanish. In addition, we need to look internally. We have a new diversity and inclusion officer who's looking at how we have various interests represented throughout our county departments and make sure that it's on the way up, that people aren't only in the lower echelons. And just to have a baseline to know what's happening in terms of diversity across the board. I believe that that's extremely important to our health and well-being.
Thank you. So we're now ready for the 1-minute rebuttals, is that true?
Yes,
Okay.
and I'm the first rebuttal. I'm all for diversity. I've sought it my entire life. I'm not for government mandated controlled diversity. As an individual, well, I'm hearing a lot of programs where the government's going to do this and that, but I ran for the CSD. I'm the first woman in the history of the CSD to serve on the board. We have had general managers that were female, but I wasn't thinking I'm going to go crack that glass ceiling. I'm thinking I'm going to protect my community. We have different people, and also airport authority where I serve, 1 woman, 8 men, and in both of these boards, by the way, I was also the diverse idea person. Now both of those boards have flipped. Now the board is more diverse because I go in and I crack the ice and people come in and break off a chunk. And so I, through the private sector, embrace diversity. I throw the most diverse party. Most of my friends are liberals because of where I live. But that makes me cool, folks. I like it. Thank you.
Anybody else want to go for a minute rebuttal?
Do you want to go, Jen?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of agreement up here. We want to, I mean, the idea is diversity is valuable. It's defined in lots of different ways. And in terms of government and bureaucracy, our goal is to make sure that we reach into as many communities as possible. We've had the same old way of doing things, and now we need to make sure we cast a broad net. And we also need to make sure that when people come into us, that we give them a fair shot, that we don't necessarily just recruit and hire people who look just like us, that we open up our minds and think who can have a different perspective. just as Karen is suggesting. We want a variety of perspectives.
Yeah, I also want to make sure that when we're talking about diversity, it's not about checking a box. It's also about creating a cultural shift so that folks, regardless of where they're coming from, feel empowered. So that's creating a culture of open communication, of honesty, of inclusion. And there's some really great principles that I like to reference: justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So it's a bit more complex here, but it's making sure that we're setting people up for success, not tokenizing them, not exploiting them. So that's my 2 cents.
As the moderator, I'm just going to put in something here that AAUW exists to further equality for women.
Didn't help me.
That's been
Thank you.
all along. Are we finished with the rebuttals and?
We all had one, but
Okay.
that's another one I'd like to talk about for more than 2 minutes.
5th question. This is the pop question. No one was given this question ahead of time. The unincorporated Lompoc Valley continues to be the only county area that does not have a community plan. So we're talking about right here. Mesa Oaks, Vandenberg Village, Mission Hills. Does this cause the inadequacy of library services, worsening circulation issues and road conditions, and fire safety issues in a community surrounded by chaparral? I'm going to repeat that. The unincorporated Lompoc Valley continues to be the only county area that does not have a community plan. Does this cause the inadequacy of library services, worsening circulation issues and road conditions, and fire safety issues in a community surrounded by chaparral? And the second part of the question, what will you do to remedy this lack of a community plan?
I had Joan first on this.
Sure.
Karen, and then
I have been a big supporter of the development of community plans because it is a stakeholder process where the community determines the character of its own neighborhoods and the community as a whole. However, what has happened over time is that we have developed community plans with a lot of investment, but then they get stale. And we really, as part of this Renew 2022, the county is looking at whether community plans are the best practice for addressing the diversity in communities. Community plans are land use, so no, it doesn't deal with library services. It could address issues of circulation and how you design that. With regard to fire safety, though, I think there's tremendous opportunities here in the Burton Mesa communities. As you know, we've held 2 forums because of your keen interest and because of the great risk that this community faces. We have $2.2 million and a 4-year program to do vegetation management here. My goal is to create a community wildfire protection plan, and that would be where the community comes together and decides how we're going to maintain that and how we build social capacity for greater resilience here. And so I think in that process, we can create some of the capacity socially. What I would like to see, though, I hear 70% of the residents in the 3rd District live in unincorporated areas. And so different areas have developed different ways to aggregate and mobilize community interest to relate and be a partner for the county. And I think one example that we might build on here after the Community Wildfire Protection Plan is possibly a municipal advisory committee or some structure like that to advise the county and have a collective vision of what you'd like to grow into.
I like the idea of planning. I like having policy and procedures in place and then accommodating certain things that were pre-existing. I live in a 120-year-old house, pre-existing, non-conforming, My children were the fourth generation to live there. It's built out of used redwood from the college school when it was torn down. It's a wonderful little cottage. And so as planning came in, things changed around us, but we didn't change. 900 square feet, low carbon footprint, no air conditioning, it's cool. But the plan for the valley, I watched this political process. We had a valley plan. Our former candidate that ran in 2016 was a gentleman I met named Bob Field. And I learned a lot about the community plan process from him and what a tough compromise, identifying, working. And so that was great. But shucks, if corporate marijuana wants to come in and give the county $6 million in additional money, the county plan just gets blown to heck. Little check there on my language, because this was a thing, the majority of the community wanted to follow the community plan, but 140 wealthy casino owners paid, this whole deal of the government, private, public partnership. People worry about corporations on one side, other people worry about the public sector. I worry about when it comes together like that. And that's what I see happening in our area and I like farm to table weed. I've smoked marijuana for a long time, but this community planning, and as we accommodate the new marijuana legalization, this community plan is going to last as long as somebody with a big blue barrel of money hands it to politicians.
So I want to start off by recognizing the importance of empowering communities and acknowledging the work that they are already doing on the ground. I know enough from working in community that there are many folks that do lots of hours of thankless work. They make sure that they're creating space, they're holding conversations, they're keeping entities alive, like those that volunteer at libraries. So I want to make sure to recognize those existing efforts. Now, in terms of community planning, I think there's a lot of good that comes out of them. But like Joan mentioned, there's a tendency for these big plans with lots of money and lots of consultants who are involved in the process to crystallize and to stagnate when really we're approaching a moving target. Our communities are dynamic and shifting. And I think that point about wildfire planning is really important. Climate change is going to present so many disruptions, disturbances, unanticipated consequences. So making sure that communities have the tools that they need on the ground to lead their own processes, and that county can come in a responsive way based on what the community wants makes the most sense to me. So again, I wouldn't be opposed to supporting a community plan if that's what the community wants. So again, empowering communities directly makes the most sense to me.
We can now have 1 minute rebuttals if people are interested in talking for another minute. Karen?
Well, because I like the additional time, as somebody that is not a professional candidate, but is a very serious candidate, I think I would make an excellent supervisor, and it would be a game changer. We would have somebody who, I am a Republican, and despite what you might read, I'm the only registered Republican in the race, and so I would like to have these discussions, and I do like planning, but I also like doing things to serve people, the private sector, and I want to protect our system. I think we have a beautiful government system here, and it's getting corrupted. It's been corrupt, and all this, we need to plan, we need more money, this, that. It just is growing this big, giant state, and it's unsustainable. It's more unsustainable than anything anybody else is saying, oh, the sky is falling. The way government is growing and the way it is affecting the private sector is a concern, and I think that I would be the ideal person to have that voice on the board. Thank you.
Any other single minute responses? Jessica, Joan?
I'll share some comments, just kind of based on what's been shared. I think it's important to recognize the value of moving towards more dynamic systems of governance more responsive systems of governance. And that only happens when people are truly engaged in the process. And I think there are a lot of barriers that have been identified. Lots of hours of work have been done recognizing needs of communities. But I think we need to make sure that folks are being empowered. And I know I keep using that word, but I think it's truly important. And that part of that empowerment is, again, valuing the work on the ground that's already done by communities, making sure that we're having those conversations. And I think this will lend itself towards greater shared success, and it's something that we can be more excited about. I live in an unincorporated part of the county. Again, we have a lot of barriers to getting the things that we need, but we have a lot of bright spots. So I think it's important to be optimistic in these times. There's a lot of ugliness out there, and local government is supposed to be a nonpartisan office. And I think that's a really important point, is that we have so much more in common than we have in difference from each other. But it's also important to recognize those differences and value them.
Thank you.
Well, I think the people in the Burton Mesa communities are quite extraordinary. There's already the Vandenberg Village Association, most of the Mesa Oaks, there's I think 4 different homeowner associations, and even in Mission Hills, they've reformed their council. Sometimes this happens when there's a proposed project that people are not very fond of, and that catalyzes it, but then you can transform it, and I think that's something that we have done in our office, and Alma Hernandez is here, and she's been extremely effective in reaching out to the community and saying, okay, this is what we can do on this issue, but what else is on your mind? And that's where we got involved in bringing the forums here, fire and road. And I assure you the road work is coming soon. It turned out to be more than what we expected. But what I'm saying is that you already have existing community networks, and you've already had meetings where you're combining them. So what we need to do is identify top priorities. I know that the tot lot now, the playground, that's one of them, and we're working hard on the priorities you have identified.
Either of you want 20 more seconds? 20 seconds.
Sure. I keep moving away from really the main thing, and that is ownership, and you talk about engagement and empowerment. I do that, and I benefit from it, just as each of you do as engaged citizens. And then you own it, and it's a really beautiful feeling. So that's what I would say. That empowers me, as the idea that I own my life. That's exciting. Thank you.
That's nice. I'd like to wake up to that.
Okay, it is time for our break. We will have approximately a 10-minute break.
Thank you very much.
There's only one question that is directed to a particular candidate. So as the moderator, I'm choosing to start with that one. This is for Karen. And the question is, are you in favor of fracking in our county?
How long shall we allow this?
We said 2 minutes, didn't we?
When we talk about fracking, it's the F word. So we had the Frack Nation movie, we had the rebuttal probably, a dozen years ago, that Fox movie, and then Philip McLear rebutted it. And it's a very interesting topic. And once again, it gets into my suspicion sometime, because I grew up around petroleum engineers who love their children, who love their community, who love their homes, and they're not going to frack me over. They are people that are trained scientists, and I listen to them, and I'm not saying that there is no role in government, particularly county government. It's why it exists, but it is to protect both sides of something. And so when you say fracking, are you talking about steam injection? What are you talking about putting in the earth? And I would really want to hear a particular project and what the petroleum engineers have to say about it, instead of just I don't want anybody to get fracked over.
You said 2 minutes.
Yes, so rebuttal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Excuse me, just to clarify, this is a 1-minute rebuttal for it.
No, you know what? I'll give the other candidates opportunity to answer this question, even though it was directed only at Karen.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I got 2 minutes.
so I just want to give a little background. The Bureau of Land Management has proposed 1 million acres in Central Coast counties for fracking. And this is not only on public lands, this is mineral rights below private lands. And this is near county parks, Nahoe, Halama, Kachuma. It's near Alisal Resort. It's near the Kate School. We do not need fracking here in our county, and they'll need infrastructure. And the way the rules are written is because they have mineral rights, they can take over surface rights. But the county has some ability to regulate that, and I'm determined to do that. I don't think fracking has any place in Santa Barbara County, especially near our county parks.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment completely. I don't think fracking has any place in our county. I don't think it makes any more financial sense. I think that it's important to protect our precious water resources here in Santa Barbara County, where we depend very much so on groundwater. So I think we need to follow the example of other communities that have said no to fracking and are looking towards clean, renewable energy and moving towards the future.
I would like to rebut. I didn't use my whole time, and I'm not going to ask because, you know, the question threw me a little bit. And then as I listened to these two ladies, I think, ooh, I stepped in a little trap there because I don't think these women want any kind of fossil fuel production. I think that they want to be in control of what kind of energy is produced. So when you say, you saw that adorable little boy sitting there. I would never want to do anything to damage our groundwater. And so it's almost like when we talk about this stuff and you list all these, the parks, the schools, I love that stuff too, but sometimes it just seems like the government wants to grab all this power and they use these tactics like, oh, none of this, but I don't think you'd allow any kind of fossil fuel production if you had your way. And the final thing I want to say about fossil fuel production that I really haven't made the point is it's not making beds or working at a casino. It's a really wonderful industry. And when you talk about revenue, it's not about, this other stuff that we're using to get our tax base. I really like the revenue that we get and that the people who do it are highly educated, responsible people who also love this planet, their families, and their own lives.
That was a 1-minute rebuttal, so we should probably offer the opportunity to Jessica and Joan as well.
Yeah, I want to recognize what Karen was saying. I think it's important not to demonize those that may be in favor of fracking. I think the fossil fuel industry has done a really good job of painting this picture of fracking of being a transition energy. So using natural gas will be a helpful way to move us away from fossil fuels in the long term. I don't think that's actually how it's played out. It just seems to be a clever tactic and trick on their part to continue exploiting these opportunities to make profit at the expense of our communities. And I think it's really important to draw examples across the country where folks have said no to fracking and in fact moved towards a community bill of rights that recognizes that everybody has a right to clean air, water, and should be safe from the dangers of things like fracking.
I don't have any more to say about fracking.
Okay, thank you very much. What commitment are you willing to make to ensure that the uplands communities of Mission Hills, Mesa Oaks, Vandenberg and Vandenberg Village are kept together in the upcoming county redistricting?
Are we going 1 minute at a time or 2 minutes at a time?
I think it's 7:30, I think 1 minute.
1 minute.
So what commitment are you willing to give to ensure that the uplands communities of Mission Hills, Mesa Oaks, and Vandenberg Village are kept together in the upcoming county redistricting? In other words, we don't want to separate this community into different districts, or do we? John?
I'll take it first. Every 10 years there's a census. At that point we redistrict. It's very important to get counted because that's how we have political power. That's also how we get money from the state and federal government. So it's important to be involved in the census. The voters in Santa Barbara County enacted Measure G. So that says that instead of the Board of Supervisors carving up the districts with advisory committees, we now have an 11-member panel that will be making that decision. So I encourage everyone here to sign up to be part of that. There are state laws that have principles that need to be followed, and keeping communities of interest together as one, that's a very important principle that the commission will be held to. But please sign up to be part of the lottery for the district to be a potential participant in the commission.
I also, okay.
Yeah.
The idea of keeping people that have shared interests in a district, the districting thing, does make sense to me. And the voice of the community is important. I agree with that, and participating. And I love hearing our current supervisor's opinion on this, because Isla Vista is such a different demographic than our rural valley, and yet our elections are decided almost exclusively in most of my adult life by Isla Vista, 18 to 22-year-olds who are coming through. Some stay, but the majority are not people who are invested in my community, and my rural community, and my multi-generational families, in many cases, community. And so I really don't like 18 to 22-year-olds having that much influence, and I don't think that you here would like that. If you want to band together as like-interested communities, I agree with that 100%, and I will actually vote that way.
Okay. I want to start off by addressing, first things first, Isla Vista. As a resident of Isla Vista who works with lots of folks who are very committed, including those 18 to 22-year-olds you were mentioning, I don't want to discount them. I don't want us to be pitted against each other. The truth is we have so much more in common with each other than we do have in difference. And I think I want to echo what Joan was saying. Participating in the census is really important. Ivy is a place where folks don't often respond to the census. So I want to do my due diligence by being a member of my community and making sure we're working to get folks participating and getting them active and engaged with local government. So serving on commissions, participating, running for office, all of those things, all of those pieces of engagement and empowerment that we mentioned. I don't have like a specific answer. I think that communities should be able to move from this political preoccupation with our geographies to a more functional sense. You know, I may be running for 3rd district, but I need to be able to speak to and collaborate with others working in different districts as well.
This next question, I guess.
Oh, could I just do whatever my rebuttal allowed time is here? I would never discount 18 to 22-year-olds. If you knew me personally, you know that that may be one of my favorite demographics. I love working with young musicians. I think that youth brings a lot of vitality, but once again, we're not talking about discounting people. We're about putting them in an urban district, a district that makes sense with the university, so we can each represent our point of view at the table. Getting back to the diversity of ideas, I will represent my community, you send so, and we talk it out and find what makes sense. That's what I would like to do. I love your age group.
I like that too.
This question seems to me to be directed to Joan, but the other two of you will be able to comment. Talk about the process with the methadone clinic. Why did this get so controversial?
The methadone clinic was proposed for Vandenberg Village because we're experiencing a tremendous crisis with opioid addiction. We have a treatment center run by Aegis in Santa Maria. We have another one in Santa Barbara. And people who are being treated in Santa Maria who live in Lompoc, the Aegis company was looking for a place that was closer for them to get their daily treatment. Aegis is not headquartered here. I believe they looked at the zip code and they thought that Vandenberg Village was a zip code that would be close enough. They also they didn't come to my office and talk to me as most project proponents do. And so they learned that Vandenberg Village is not close to Lompoc, that it doesn't have good transportation, and that they needed to find a center that was closer to where their actual clients are.
Thank you. Comments from either of you?
So that was question for exclusively Joan?
Well, I just, because she is in a position of decision making.
Joan had a minute to respond, so you
Yes,
have a minute.
yes.
Jessica
Yeah, that's fair.
had a minute.
Yes, obviously, everything anybody could say about the addiction crisis, and it ties into some of the things we were talking about with homelessness, but there is a lot of addiction with people who don't have the homeless problem. So I understand how it started, but it gets back to putting things in appropriate places, like putting a 12-story casino in a little rural area, just like kind of a bad fit. So I get that, and that's why sometimes these things need to be discussed, and we need to identify and talk about it before it happens so we have a shared understanding. But yes, obviously, people need help.
Yeah, and I'm just going to answer from the understanding I have of the controversy as that's how it was phrased. I think some folks have exploited this election to create a controversy, so I think that needs to be acknowledged. And I also think I need to go back to that point that Karen made, and I think that was really important, the need for collaboration and planning. So making sure that when folks come into our communities and want to set up shop, and yes, they're providing a critical service, that there is that communication, that they know that they need to go and approach the communities directly. They know that they need to go make that effort and reach out to those who have decision-making power. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, next question. How are you going to fund affordable housing programs? I'm not sure whose turn it is to start.
Might be mine. Once again, it's one of those questions. I don't think that is the role of government. And when I didn't have a place to live, I went somewhere that was the fit. Once again, we've got to make sense here. We need to get real about how we address these things and not be talking about a solution that doesn't fit the problem. Right now, I'm trying to live my life the way I want to live it. And if I couldn't, if something happened, I would find a place that worked for me. I help people through a nonprofit. We talk about nonprofits. My nonprofit that I'm involved in is the Opportunity Shop. We get no government money. We're funded. We have a volunteer here in the audience. It is all volunteer. People do it. And when we come to charity, being on both ends of it, it's a beautiful experience on both ends. I've had the grace on being on the receiving end. I've been on the helping end. And that's how I would address affordable housing.
I'm happy to answer. Again, affordable housing is absolutely critical. It's something that we need to be providing, and I think the county needs to show leadership in coming up with creative and innovative solutions to deploy the housing that we need. Things that come to mind in terms of how we can fund it, I think a housing bond would be a really great thing to work towards, again, in partnership with our communities, making sure we're sourcing those good ideas that folks are already trying out across the country. Another idea that was also mentioned by Cause, who put forward the 805 Housing Crisis Report, was the focus on community land trusts. Make sure that we put aside land where we can have permanently affordable housing for folks, and we're creating living and learning communities that can stand the test of time.
Is this a 1 minute or a 2 minute?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. We've done a survey on our economic vitality effort, and housing is the #1 problem, workforce housing. It's a problem for business, it's a problem for nonprofits and getting new energy, it's a problem for keeping the talent that we produce here in our county, and it's a problem for the county and public safety because we've got fire and safety people having to come from SLO and Ventura. So we've begun with the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit. That is one way that we've created regulations to allow more housing. We also, we've created more farm worker housing, and we've made a number of new units, employer provided housing, like Cottage Hospital, like Golden Inn. Maybe the county needs to do that for the public safety. LA did a bond. There are, sometimes employers can guarantee their employee is reliable and they can reduce the down payment. There are a number of different ways you can deal with the financing of it.
Thank you.
I would like to rebut, if I'm tracking things. Imagine we have a housing crisis here. This is the most desirable place, one of the most desirable places in the world to live, and I've never felt entitled to live at the nicest place unless I could earn it, because I own my life. And these people who often are making these decisions live in these HOAs on public employee pensions, and the two professional candidate situations that are in this race, Porter and Joan. And it's just like, really? I want to... If I can't afford to live here, I will go somewhere where I can afford it. And the more the government tries to fix the problem, the worse it gets. When we say, we've got to do this because it's getting worse, sure it is, because you guys have been driving the car, you guys being the state coming up with solutions. People come up with solutions. Volunteers, community engagement, all that stuff is fine as long as it's voluntary. This whole, no, we're going to do this, the auxiliary dwelling thing might be great for some people, but the people who already owned homes there, not so great for our housing.
Yeah, I want to challenge this notion that we need to fight over scarce resources. I think it's time to move beyond that, and I think it's important to recognize that this conversation around affordable housing, we're talking about people that are being pushed out of our county. People's families who have been here for generations are no longer able to afford rents, able to even think of buying a home in a place like Santa Barbara County. I'm also thinking of senior citizens and their ability to stay in the county. And again, that point that I made of seeing elderly people on the streets, a lot of those folks in conversation have been kicked out of senior homes. So I think it's important to recognize it's not about having people flock here. It's about honoring and recognizing the folks that make this county what it is, and they can't afford to live here.
I would like to second what Jessica said. In LA, rents have gone up twice as fast as wages. In Santa Barbara County, the study she mentioned by cause, 3 times. So why is that the case? In some cases, it's landlords who are taking advantage of situations. In Guadalupe, 3 families will live in a 3-bedroom house, and the landlord raises it 30%. They're homeless. I had a social worker say, I've got a woman here, 2 children, she works, but she's not abused, or she doesn't fit a category, and so she's going to be living with her children in a car. So unless we address that problem, we're going to have the homeless problem.
Thank you. Last question that I received from the audience says, what are you going to do about the cannabis ordinance, or about cannabis ordinance issues, odors, incompatibility with existing areas and farms? Oh, Charlie, this is...
What is that?
No, that's not what it says. With existing ag and EDRNs.
Who do you want to start with, and how long do we get?
You have a minute?
1 minute.
But this room is 1 minute per question. And okay, 1 minute 30 seconds. 1 minute 30 seconds.
No. I was going to say 1 minute time. So
yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, I'm happy to go first, and people can to lay it out a little bit, because I've been very much involved in this. The voters of California passed the initiative, and the state has been addressing this very novel issue, as has the county. Many cannabis industries like to locate here because we have a short wet season and a long warm season, and it's very desirable for cannabis and many other crops. So the state has been changing its rules, and the county has been changing its rules. We already had medical cannabis, and we already had a lot of illegal cannabis coming on panga boats in the forest, growing even in people's backyards. I just read that in Napa, which has banned cannabis, the industry, illegal, is as big as the wine industry, but they don't have any money to regulate or to enforce against that. So we are seeking a well-regulated industry, and I have been the leader on the board to make adjustments, like a countywide cap, like a ban on 20 acres in residential areas and a CUP from 20 to 40. This month, the Planning Commission is going back and reviewing the conflicts with agriculture between cannabis and other crops. That was something we hadn't anticipated, and we're dealing with that now.
1 minute and 15 seconds.
Thank you. I like this topic. I was talking to a family farmer during the break, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm a native Californian, and I have smoked a shipload of weed in my life, and it was illegal back in the day, but people managed to farm it without stinking up the place too much. However, when we would drive by a dead skunk, my children would say, they thought they were at home. So, it's a bad smell for some people. It's like me and petroleum for others. But I don't think the smell is the primary problem, because I think, we talk about innovation. We will be able to mitigate the smell. I don't know if we'll be able to mitigate the really expensive regulations that will drive out family farmers and bring in, I won't say Grimschmay or some like big giant corporation. And then we've got the cash issue here, because right now the federal banking standards haven't kept up with progressive California and our weed, and it does create a lot of problems. And this is not the first time people have tried to legalize weed, and growers illegally are marijuana experts, and they saw these problems coming. People do break rules, but I think this is really a nice time to make it affordable for the families, and don't make it where only the big guys can get in. And I really see it going that direction when I listen to bureaucrats planning me getting high. It's like, stay away from my weed.
I think Karen and Joan brought up some really good points. And yes, a shout out to those mom and pop operations and making sure that they're able to maintain their farming. Oh, sorry. I think this is the point, is cannabis is not going anywhere. How we choose to respond to this potential and amazing opportunity, if we look at the revenues that have already come in from cannabis in our county, I think we overshot our projections, right? So it's a good industry. There needs to be better regulation around it, and part of that regulation is making sure that we're connecting with the communities that are really interested in having that, having cannabis energize their economies. And I understand that Lompoc has been embracing cannabis in a lot of ways. And I can see some upset faces too. So that point about the smell, from what I understand, it was actually a farmer who went out on her own and found technology, a vapor technology, to kind of help with smell mitigation. So maybe it's about looking forward into the future and understanding those trends so we can be better prepared to regulate and create those common sense, again, regulations that'll help us avoid these issues moving forward. I don't think cannabis is going anywhere. Hemp is another thing. That's another part of the cannabis equation that we need to take a real look at, and that has real potential. I'll leave it there.
I don't believe I've rebutted on the marijuana. I like oil and I like weed. Those are two topics that you can come to my home anytime and talk about.
So, before you begin, we're going to keep it to 1 minute solid, okay, for each rebuttal.
Okay, more government, less fun. It's just such a drag to hear like, oh, we're gonna, and the whole financial thing of it. Once again, I'm feeling like the golden pork chop in the room. And when the different efforts to legalize marijuana, and once again, it's been a long process for me, my argument to the people gathering signatures at the grocery store was, it's gonna be all about the money. And it's just gonna be one more place where the bureaucracy grows and the freedom shrinks, and that's not good for me. Once again, that's not cool. Smoking weed can be cool if done responsibly, and once again, planting in the right place. I do not think a marijuana enterprise belongs where there are families or there's a place. Take it to Funtown, do it, leave us alone, we'll leave you alone.
Anybody else?
I would add just a little bit. Regulations are there to protect health and to avoid conflicts. What's interesting about cannabis is that the state law requires it be tested for 67, I think, different substances. And so that is what is creating some of the conflict between more conventional agriculture. When you spray here and then it drifts over onto the cannabis, then that has effects on that crop. And it's very important to regulate those substances because as we saw from some of the vaping with the CBD, there can be health consequences. So we want to make sure that the product is pure. And so that is one of the sources of conflict that we hadn't anticipated, and now we're trying to work that out.
Thank you.
I don't have a rebuttal.
Jessica?
Yeah, I don't have a rebuttal.
Okay. All right, now we're moving into closing statements, and each candidate gets 1 minute for a closing statement. And Morel, do you have the order?
I believe
I go back to the first?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jessica.
Joan and me. I'm lucky number 3. I liked it when I drew it.
Okay.
She starts, then it's Joan, then you.
Okay. So I'm going to choose to end the way that I began. I'm going to project from a place of gratitude. I was very happy to share in the spirited exchange of ideas. And thank you to Karen, thank you to Joan, and thank you to the American Association of University Women for, again, holding this space for us. Thank you.
I agree. It's inspiring to be here with people who care about our county and care about your community, and thank you for attending. You know, how a person conducts themselves as a candidate reveals a lot about how they're going to how they're going to behave and conduct themselves in office. Are they open? Are they available? Do they show up? My fellow candidates here made a commitment to be here, and they've honored it. And I've shown up here for you in the Burton Mesa communities. I've shown up for the CSDs and the farmers market, the park and playground project, Mesa Oaks neighborhood, the road issues, the forum on streets and fire safety. I've shown up for office hours with just a few people trickling in, and I've shown up with roomfuls of angry people. And where needed, I brought county staff out here to bring government to you. And we've listened, and we've heard you, and we've responded. I've shown up for you, and I hope that on March 3rd, I ask that you show up for me. Thank you.
Right. Thank you all for having me, but also for being here, because I also love to engage. I don't know if I was able to project that or not. And I really do enjoy the exchange of ideas, because I think that's how we hone our ideas. I have changed positions. You may not believe that, because I feel strongly about what I feel, but as I exchange ideas with people, when I was young, I was very pro-death penalty, and now I do not want the state in control of who lives or dies. I have had these arguments with people and changed my position, but who you see here is who you will see. You can always trust me to be me. And I say this is a primary. It is a primary here. Vote your heart. You can vote you're going to have a choice between two people in the general, and I get the statistics. It's very likely going to be the two heavily funded professional candidates, and we know who they are. I'm doing it. I have no staff. I got a group of friends and a few family members, but I believe that if I make it to the general election, we can have this real exchange of ideas, and wouldn't that be refreshing instead of two stiffs admiring themselves in the mirror? Yeah, let's talk about some stuff.
Okay, thank you all. This was a wonderful forum, I believe. And I want to thank Deb Willems, who is our hostess here. And we have a little something we'd like to present to you as a thank you for providing this spot for us.
Thank you.
And then I would just like to say that AAUW is sponsoring a speech contest, and it will be on January 31st. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the location is
City Hall.
Lompoc City Hall. That's where it was last year as well.
The community
And-
is invited. And
Yes.
it's from 4 to 6 p.m.
4 to 6 p.m. on January 31st at City Hall to hear young people who are writing speeches on
Are men and women created equal, or the suffragettes of 1920 still suffering in 2020?
Do you have an opinion on the topic?
Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. What was the date of the speech contest? Oh, that was fun.
Thank you.
I keep it real.